Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 643, We Have Friends. July 19th, 2021. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. Tech companies are all in on creators to the tune of billions of dollars in incentives to lure them to new platforms. The hope is to make billions more in advertising. But will the efforts diminish their influence and marketing effectiveness? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, why Facebook has delayed their brand safety audit, the pandemic's impact on executives, Twitter killing fleets, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder and principal consultant at the Idea Integration Company. Mr. Saul Colt is here. Hi, Saul.
Holy mackerel, Bob. It's such a pleasure to be here. Can't wait to get started.
Yeah, I can't wait to get started either. Now, next, he's Executive Creative Director at Charlotte's Web CBD Products. Mr. Colin Glom joins us. Hi, Colin.
Hey, Bob. I'm so sorry it's taken so long for us to reconnect, but I'm very, very excited to be back on the show.
I'm glad you can make it as well. I'm really glad to have you on the program. And finally, we welcome back the Department Chair of Management and Marketing at Oakland University. Dr. Janelle Townsend joins us. Hi, Janelle.
Hi. Thanks for having me back. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, absolutely. This is a great panel. I love what your credentials are. I love talking to you all, so this should be a good one. Let's start off right away and talk about the creator mirage. Creators may be just a more palatable word for influencer, but Facebook, Amazon, Google, really all the tech giants are looking to attract creators to their platform in what's turning out to be a pretty high stakes play to get their marketing value locked in. But the question is, Saul, does this effort to lock in creators on specific platforms enhance the creator economy, make more money for everybody, make them more exciting, or simply make it more difficult for creators overall and potentially marginalize them, marginalize a large portion of them in the process? What do you think?
So there's actually a lot to unpack here, but let's start with, Facebook's recent announcement. They're pledging $1 billion towards rewarding creators for making Facebook their home. Like, wow, $1 billion. Man, I'd like a piece of that $1 billion. Only problem is, like most of the creator influencer world, this offer is by invite only, and they're really looking to lure people away from YouTube and OnlyFans. Okay, maybe not OnlyFans, but who knows?
I'm pretty sure, given the Facebook's impropriety laws and everything else they're doing, they're not looking for OnlyFans people to show up. But go on.
Well, maybe they just want a backdoor into OnlyFans. And yes, I said backdoor. Send your emails to Bob. The goal of getting people off YouTube is sound, except that YouTube pays out $10 billion a year, and they've paid out $30 billion over the last 3 years. It may not be exactly $10 billion. I did the math and divided it by 3. But they pay their creators a lot more than Facebook is. And even though Facebook is making an effort, it isn't as good a deal as some of the other platforms out there, because they're actually asking their creators to jump through way more hoops for a lot less money. Because, one of the big things that you have to go a little bit deeper into all these stories about this $1 billion is YouTube shares the revenue on any ads played on your videos, where Facebook doesn't want to share, but rather just pay based on performance and frequency. So they're going to pay the exact same money for number of views and number of videos, whereas YouTube, there's a big difference that they charge to someone like a Nike than they would someone else. So it's not a level playing field. The thing that is missing on all these platforms, and this gets a little bit back to what you're asking in your original question, is none of these platforms offer the tools or the place where creators, let me start again. The thing is missing on all these platforms, got to get it back in my head. I got distracted by OnlyFans. It's missing is still how to get the place where creators are attractive to marketers in the early days. So how do you actually become that tier one influencer? And none of these platforms actually want to create the next level of creator or influencer. They just want to just attack and own the ones that have done all the hard work. And as we all know, the 80-20 rule is way alive and well in the creator world, whether it be podcasting, influencers, but 20% of the people are making 80% of the money. And those are the only people who are really attractive in this Facebook deal, where YouTube, they want everybody. OnlyFans, they want everybody. So that aside, as a creator, I would be hesitant to leave a good thing for Facebook, as they historically have shown that they don't reward brands and creators long-term for building communities and audiences on their platform. Of course, everybody remembers those free brand pages in the early days of Facebook, where they really encouraged, tier one brands to almost get rid of their websites and just own their communities on Facebook. And then, after a certain amount of time, they said, hey, and now it's going to cost you X number of dollars. So the goal of creators should always be to have a presence where the people are, but also own their communities and try to get them to come to you directly. Patreon is an interesting example.
Well, before we go to other platforms and Patreon, you seem to have done a lot more research than I have, so I'm really impressed with this level of knowledge. And I have to ask a question.
You
here.
wave $1 billion in front of me, Bob. I want my piece, but
I'm wondering.
I don't qualify.
I'm wondering about the Facebook's offer here. Are they, if they're not treating people differently, like treating certain stars or certain people with huge audiences differently, how are they getting them to come over? Or is it just come to Facebook and do a Me Too, not hashtag Me Too, but a Me Too type thing where I'm also on Facebook, but I'm doing my main thing over on Google? Or are they looking for people to jump ship completely and break all ties? And is there a better deal if you do that? I mean, I'm trying to get a sense of what's going on with this offer.
From what I could find, they're just offering incentives based on performance. So it's not like Spotify that's waving hundreds of millions of dollars to tier one podcasters, and they're not looking for exclusive deals. They're basically saying, come to us and we'll give you our deal. But I haven't seen anything about exclusivity. I haven't seen anything about tying people into certain things. It really is about invites, side deals, no transparency. Facebook has never been one to really show you any numbers or show you anything. So it's really about, come give us your content. We're going to spread it around, or you're going to spread it around. You still have to do the hard work, but we're going to give you a little bit of the advertising of stuff that's directly related to you, but we're not going to give you the advertising. One of the main things is Facebook's, their way of measuring things is so different than YouTube. YouTube knows exactly which ad played pre-roll to your video, which ad, banner ads are going at the bottom third of your video while it's playing. And they can slice and dice those numbers and tell you exactly, no confusion. Facebook, from what I read, they want to well, first of all, they don't want to pay you for maybe a direct brand ad that is above your video. And, how do they know if you were just scrolling or actually watch the video? Like, there's all these the whole thing, I went deep on this, and I still don't really understand what the benefit is. Like to think I'm a pretty smart guy, so that leads me to believe that they led with this $1 billion, and they kind of hoped nobody would go as deep as I did. But listen, I'm a guy who's trying to retire before I'm 80. So I see $1 billion and I'm in. But nothing about this attracted me to really make any change in the stuff I do. And of course, if you are a brand out there that would like to sponsor me on anything, I dare you, because I actually turned down 2 brand deals today because I didn't like the product. So I challenge you, brands, try to get me to take your money.
That's fantastic. I hope someone takes you up on the offer. Colin, what's your opinion about this? And I know we kind of went down the rabbit hole of what Facebook's offering versus what Google's offering, but Amazon's even in this picture. I mean, with the Twitch network and also with what they're trying to do on their main platform, their sales platform, trying to get creators to come into the mix and sell products and promote products for them, build in ad revenue, et cetera. So, I mean, all the tech giants are really looking to get involved in this space, in the creator space. Is this going to negatively impact creators over time? Will it negatively impact advertising effectiveness when marketers go and use creators and try to harness their influence? Or is this going to be a boon for everybody and make the whole space that much more vibrant? Colin, did I lose you?
Sorry, man, I was on mute. I
I tell everybody to go on mute. It's just like, and I really shouldn't do that.
No, that was great advice. I was asleep at the wheel because I was listening to Saul wax poetically, and I went as deep as he did as well. In terms of, I have to do this, obviously, it's part of our jobs, right? So, I think the conversation around Facebook is almost irrelevant. The $1 billion, to Saul's point, is completely irrelevant. When you look at things like Josh Richards leaving TikTok, who is probably, I have no idea what these kids are making. They're 22 years old and they're making obscene amounts of money. I'm only a little bit jealous. And when you see that these guys are being pulled into even newer apps, like one called Triller, which is just completely audio and dancing based. These kids are now sitting on the boards of these, companies who just raised $28 million. So they're making their fair share of money for kids that age, and they are highly mobile, and they're going to go wherever the media takes them. And they can they're creating their own markets. So Facebook is really, really late to this, and I don't think the $1 billion is going to even help catch them up. So that's point number one. Yeah. Point number two, I'd like to go back a little bit in time and have you guys remember a book, I think from the early 2000s, by a guy named Richard Florida. It was called The Rise of the Creative Class. And this guy, in a grade A class of futurism, predicted that 30% of the workforce, which is over like 38 million people in this country, would be doing creative jobs that would completely recreate the working landscape. He predicted being able to work remotely. He predicted being able to do stuff on your own terms at your own time, being your own boss, and be decentralized in the time that you're able to do that. He didn't nail content per se, but the idea that you couldn't have a job that was automatable or replicable by a machine made you a creative thinker, and in his mind allowed you to be in this elite class of people. So in his mind, people were competing. He was waking up mayors and town councils and things of that nature in order to get these people to recognize that they needed to start to attract these people to their cities, or their cities would die. And that's exactly what's happening with these platforms. Now, he did not predict a global pandemic. He did not predict all the rest of the things that have really brought this to a forehead in the last year. But these kids are able to work wherever they want, whenever they want, doing whatever they want, and they hold all of the cards. And so therefore, they're able to create their own media opportunities, like things like Sway House and all these other things that sound absolutely ridiculous. They're the new real world of our generation, or at least my generation. So the sky's the limit in terms of opportunities, whether it's platforms or talent or marketers.
See, I disagree with two things. One, yeah, Richard Florida got a lot of things right, but so have the Simpsons. Heyo. But beyond that, the thing that when you say that these kids, they're 22 years old, the sky's the limit, they're changing the world, and I know we are a marketing and advertising podcast. Every year, or I'd even say every 8 months, there's this crazy story about one of these people with like 1 million or 2 million or whatever number of followers do something really, really reckless that like makes me wonder, as somebody who advises big brands, would I really put my money in this pot of gold? Like, I don't know all these YouTubers. I don't follow it that closely, but and I didn't even follow this story, so I could have all the facts wrong. So please send your emails to Bob. But that guy David Dobrik, I think was his name, and there was something where he live streamed something about a girl being assaulted or something like this, and this guy went from like $1 million a month to being like canceled and out of a job, and pretty much every single brand sponsorship turning the other direction. So like, man, like we've been talking about creators. I remember Inc. magazine put, I think it was Will I Am or some, or maybe it was Pharrell, and I took deep offense to this. It was like a whole issue maybe 15 years ago or 10 years ago, and they were like, the future of creators, and they were already all celebrities. There was no real people in this list of like the 100 most influential creators or whatever, or I think they called them makers or something. There was the maker movement that died, the creator movement that's going crazy now, and I think it's got legs, but I think it's going to reinvent itself a couple times. But man, like we're still putting so much stock in exactly what you said, Colin, kids. And man, kids, I'm not, I don't want to start a whole, hate session here. There's some brilliant people, in that age group, and there's some people who will change the world, but there's also a lot of people who got really, really lucky, and they were in the right place at the right time. And how many brands have been burned by like some of these loosey-goosey arrangements, taking a chance on somebody because they're trying to ride a crazy wave, and I don't know, I probably have gone way too of a digression, and I'm not even on the same topic anymore, but I don't know, like I just think we keep talking about this brave new world, and I think we're running way too fast and not doing it as smartly as we could.
It's true. I think what you're saying is in heart true, but it's always been that way when we're talking about any kind of endorser. I mean, you have someone endorsing your product and suddenly you find out he's got child porn. It's not going to be good for you in the end. So any kind of endorsement deal is problematic. But there's something that you said, and I want Janelle's opinion about this. There's something you said earlier about 20% of the people on YouTube are making 80% of the money, which is pretty much the model that's always been true from movie sales to CD sales. 20% of the product makes 80% of the money. I mean, it's just the way it is. And Janelle, for a while there in the early days of the internet and the creator economy, we talked a lot about the long tail and about how that would flip it on its head. And it never happened. I mean, it just never happened. We had this short little spans of time where everything flattened out and you had lots of little creators making product, making entertainment, getting audience. And then suddenly some of them rose to the top because they were extra good, and then celebrities got involved, and suddenly we're back to the 2080 model again. And I'm wondering if that's the case, is it worth trying to attract lots and lots of creators to your platform when really the money's coming from that 20%? And shouldn't they be doing more of a Spotify model where they're trying to woo them away with exclusive deals, that type of thing? All the platforms trying to take that approach, or does it still make sense to try to promise that whole long tail mentality and not deliver on it?
Well, I think you make a good point there, but we do know that pretty much everything eventually trends to the mean, right? It goes back to whatever the core average is for whatever that is. And I think that's the same here, as we sort of know that 80-20 rule holds for many things. In this case, with influencers, I think what happens is that We get those few that are very famous, and then it because of the way the algorithms work, they get more famous, right? Because it's perpetuating, it's self-perpetuating. I suspect, though, something we haven't talked about is what Facebook's goal is here. And I suspect it's to try and attract a younger demographic. Because remember, Facebook has sort of become, that's that thing that grandma uses. That's the thing that your parents use. This is not the kind of thing, kids don't use Facebook anymore. They may have a Facebook account, but it's more like a utility. And it's really interesting because I predicted around the time that they went public that that's what would happen to Facebook, is it would become a utility. And that, hey, that's where it's the new white pages. Right? How do you find somebody? Oh, go look them up on Facebook. They're bound to be there, especially if they're below a certain age. And so, or initially below a certain age. Now it's become just sort of across the board. And, I've had, people I know, I have my crazy cousins, fourth cousins who are 75 years old, become my friends on Facebook, and I'm supposed to be there lurking, kind of not really a user anyway. So I have found that to be interesting that these people find me, but that's not who Facebook wants to attract, right? Because who do advertisers want to pay for? Advertisers want the younger people, and the influencers tend to be younger, I think, and the people who have the dreams of becoming big content providers and big creators. And those are the people they're going to look for, the ones that Facebook is now recruiting and paying, the people who have been successful. So that would be my guess. So
I agree with you, but going by what you're saying, then they should be using the Spotify model and try to lock in some people exclusively. Right now, they're saying, give us half of your content, and they're really saying we just want to bombard people with content, and they can pick and choose, and we want to be a depository for a little of everything, because there's always like suckers we could sell ads like
because I don't. Like no,
but I don't. If they really want to attract people, they have to be exclusive.
One second. Let's hear what Janelle has to say. Hold on a second, Janelle. What were you going to say?
No, I guess I disagree with that, because the people who are going to be best known are in other channels anyway, right? The people who are going to actually attract those younger users are going to be in the other places that those younger users are. So that's why I don't necessarily agree with that. The people who are already established most likely aren't going to be something that they're going to follow for.
But I'm saying they have to be exclusive with these tier 1 people, because if I can still see this tier 1 person on YouTube and they're also on Facebook, why would I ever move when I'm already subscribed to them? I'm already getting notifications on Facebook. On YouTube, moving to Facebook is a change in behavior. And the only way I'm going to actually force that change is if it's the only place I can see that thing or person that I idolize. So if they're not making things exclusive, it's a fool's effort. They're doing it half-hearted.
I think you're actually both right. The way that Solid you just articulated that, I do agree with you. But the reality of the situation is the really powerful tier 1 people that you're talking about know that they can't get locked into something like Facebook. It's a non-starter for the younger generation. The platforms that are now coming up are 4 generations removed from Facebook, and these kids do not even look at it. It's really interesting to see, doing the work that I do with Gen Z targeting I have to learn every day about these new platforms that are coming out. It's insane how fast they move and how quickly they migrate from one thing to the next, and they're well beyond anything that I could have conceived of when Facebook started, whatever it was, like 10, 12 years ago. So I do believe that Janelle is also correct in the sense that they have to be everywhere at all times. And so they should just be trying to get as many people to come over here as possible, just to at least be known for content. Because right now it is just what Janelle's talking about. It's a way to find people. It's a utilitarian tool. It's like your Rolodex. And so if you're not trying to catch up with your friends, it's kind of a useless platform right now in terms of content.
So one thing we haven't mentioned, and maybe this will be the last sort of, thread of this topic. But this has been so focused on the creator, and I'm making an assumption it's the individual creator. What about these really great media companies like Complex, who are throwing money into Facebook? How are they going to look at something like this? Even the New York Times and some of these, established media entities who are paying to share their stuff, and now they're saying, oh wait, like you're going to just start paying less professional people and people without the same credibility and history as us, because their audiences, like I don't think a bunch of famous YouTubers coming over are going to actually help the New York Times. So it's not like Facebook can say this is good for you, but the New York Times pays a lot of money to make sure their content is shared there through posts and stuff like that. So I think it's actually it'd be interesting to see where this nets out, and because like they're not hurting their main source of revenue, but they're certainly tinkering with it.
Well, that was my next question, and it kind of dovetails into the next topic, which is how does this create additional marketing opportunities, for advertisers? Is this really giving us opportunities to promote our content, promote our products? Is it giving media companies equal footing? All those questions come up into play. And, the next topic that I wanted to talk about is a year after the boycott, or just about a year after that big Facebook boycott, Facebook not only is not allowed a brand safety audit to proceed, but they've now indefinitely postponed the effort. And I'm wondering, Colin, we can guess why they are avoiding this whole thing, but what is the long-term bet in making this move for themselves? And really, given the whole creator thing going on, it doesn't matter to brands in the end whether or not there's more creators to advertise on Facebook with, because they're still not doing brand safety audits. So how can I be sure that my brand's going to be safe doing anything with Facebook going forward if they're unwilling to even look at the problem?
It's a very fair question. I want to address your first one before I get to the second one. The answer to your first question leading into this was, it's a nightmare. If you're a brand and you have to create, it used to be back in the day, like when I started in this industry, you had ABC, NBC, CBS, and some cable channels. And now you have infinite platforms with different parameters and sizes. Everything's different. Every kind of content that's on those platforms has to be specified for that particular audience. And so it's impossible for a brand. It creates more opportunity, yes, but it creates more friction, more work. It creates infinite headaches and less return on your individual dollar because it's so hard to track. So, in a nutshell, yes, there's more opportunity, but being able to optimize that opportunity is very, very, very difficult. It creates many, many work streams just to be on these multiple platforms simultaneously with similar creative, let alone with individualized creative, which is what's supposed to happen on these platforms. To get back to
I was just going to agree with you, Colin, is that's exactly true. I mean, this is the splintering has to be such a headache for people who, like you, who are in the trenches every day trying to figure out where's that best place to go, because it's so tough now, right? To figure out exactly, and how narrow do you want your target market to be for a given product or brand? Yeah.
You're speaking to the choir, but yeah, it's very, very difficult to not only understand if you're going after the right target on the right platform, but if you're delivering the right message. And by the time you figure that out, the rules have changed almost completely. It's happening on a quarterly basis. It's that fast moving.
But you were going to answer the second part of the question about brand safety.
It sounds like Janelle and I are in the same camp. I'm going to try to be fair and balanced on this subject, but in full disclosure, I immediately deleted Facebook from my phone, and I very rarely visit it since I saw Social Dilemma. I don't know if you guys have seen that film, but that scared the bejesus out of me, and so I've literally stopped using Facebook almost entirely. But I did, obviously, because it's part of my career and things I have to do on a day-to-day basis, I do read a lot about it. For those that don't know, the Facebook was supposed to go into this audit as of the end of June of this year, and they have not. for a myriad of reasons. The audit that was supposed to be was from the Media Rating Council, which is supposed to really take a look at what kind of content is on the platform and make sure that the brands that are associated with the platform can be relatively assured that they're not sitting next to anything that is controversial, anything that is problematic for a brand to be sitting next to. So the reason that Facebook has punted this is because they want to conduct and I'm using air quotes here, an internal readiness inquiry, which to me sounds like, okay, this is...
Bury the bodies, burn the files. Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. We're not ready for that yet. We still have to delete a lot of things. So yeah, it sounds suspicious at the very least. And the fact that you couldn't do it over the course of a year is even more suspicious. So what I'm suspecting is they kind of hoped that this would just go away. After the immediate uprising of all the brands a couple of years ago, or a year ago, I guess, it was just a year ago. God, it's been a long year. Anyway, the fact that they're kind of hoping that this would go away, or now the money is starting to slowly roll back in, they're kind of turning a blind eye to it. Now, having said that, Facebook does have, as a person who's a user for social, especially on the media buying side, they do have a fairly impressive list of features that are designed to help with this kind of oversight at the individual brand level. They have publisher lists and they have delivery reports. You can use your own block lists. You can look at the inventory of the places where your ad was actually shown. You can actually declassify some of them after the fact. There's lots and lots of different things that you can do at a brand level to kind of protect yourself. Now, going a little bit deeper into this, because I really did want to find out why they hadn't pulled the trigger on doing this audit. They legitimately have grown into organizations like the TAG group, which is the Trustworthy Accountability Group. That was started by the 4As. It's over 600 brands, advertisers, and platforms all together working as part of a conglomerate to try and address this issue. They're also part of the Global Alliance for Responsible Media. So there's things that are happening there. This does look a little fishy. But they're also trying to do so many other things at the same time that I feel like it's almost kind of like, can we serve all masters simultaneously? There's another point that was brought up by Carolyn Everson, who is the VP of Global Marketing at Facebook, which I thought was kind of interesting, but a little bit toothless at the same time. She really kind of puts it on the brands, and they have to be what your associated tolerance for risk is for being on any platform. And she used some pretty glib kind of references. She talked about, if you're in a particular city that all of a sudden has a terrorist attack associated with it and your billboard's next to it, you're going to have negative fallout from being at that site, which I thought was kind of interesting. She also, mentioned things like mass shootings. The one that came to mind, which happened, just a little bit ago here in the Colorado area, was the one at King Super. So that's obviously a negative brand association, but not really something that I would associate with oversight or something that brand could control. Like Facebook can control this, in my opinion, and they have turned a blind eye to a certain degree about whether or not they want to own it.
So I'm going to take a different approach. First of all, that whole billboard thing is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because
I thought so too.
Yeah, like it's not like they started a picket campaign, after the thing happened or something like that. That's ridiculous. When it's digital, it's a very different, equation and stuff like that. But I'm going to go as far to say, and this is a very cynical approach. I'm going to state my bias at the beginning, but I don't think they want to go through this because they probably don't have to. When you say ad dollars have only started rolling back in, I think that I remember when I was in high school, you guys can look this up to find out how old I am, but there was like a boycott of Snapple, and I don't remember why, but there was just a weird boycott of Snapple. Snapple pulled their ads off some major program, like I don't remember if it was Howard Stern or Letterman or something, and then people boycotted Snapple. That lasted longer than the Facebook boycott. Brands, made a good, real, public protest, and then, when sort of the brouhaha died down, it was kind of like business as usual. And if any ad revenue went down, I think it was more directed to COVID than this whole boycott, because the boycott had some real steam for about 3 weeks, and then it's sort of just the world went back to normal. So, why dig it all back up, and why ruin a good thing? They make so much money and people aren't asking for it, so I give it to them. That's kind of my slant on it. But I also agree with everything you guys said. So I think, we covered this from sort of every angle.
Well, I would like Janelle to weigh in one more time on this one issue that Colin brought up, which is they kind of are acting like they believe that this problem is just going to go away. And I'm wondering, do they have a point? Because it's just like the brands had a toothless protest that lasted a month, if that. Nobody really put any heart into it. You had a lot of consumers making a lot of noise, but that's kind of gone away as people have getting back to normal. So I'm wondering, are they going to suffer any negative consequences at all without a brand safety audit? And is this something that's probably smart for them to be doing in order to avoid the obvious embarrassment of having some of this stuff exposed again?
It's interesting what Facebook has been able to get away with. I guess that it's, I have to agree. I think that it probably is just going to go away until there's some major problem. And then it'll come back again and come to the surface and say, now, wait a second, you guys were supposed to do this. And
right.
until that time, until there's some really serious financial or regulatory implication because of it, I don't think it's going to matter.
It's not a matter of if, but when that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, it's in their best interest to do it. It's kind of been bananas to me that they're not willing to put the money or resources behind it, because that's what dictates what's important at an organization. If you're not willing to put bodies and money and time against it, then it doesn't matter to you. And that's clearly, they haven't signed a contract with MCR. They haven't even been in negotiations with MCR. So there's very little opportunity for this to happen within the calendar year, for sure. So they clearly do not care about this. Let me just state that point blank. But if you're not familiar with this organization, it's called Sleeping Giants. Ex-advertising guy, creative, I believe some from Chiat Day, started this, and because he saw some of his work being presented next to content that he was abhorred by. And so he literally makes it his mission to call out platforms that are showing traditional advertising you would expect from P&G or
I should probably caveat that the Sleeping Giants was founded by a woman, and it's just like co-founded by a woman who had a falling out. So let's give credit. I forget her name. I forget his name, but it was a
I feel like
effort.
his name was Matt or something, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the backstory of it. I just know what they're able to do in terms of attention grabbing, right? And that's the kind of thing. As soon as they see something that looks fishy or like they're just putting ads anywhere they can, and it's against some crazy content, believe me, it's going to come back around again. And Facebook's going to be wished they had decided to sign on this, because if they haven't even started the process of getting this audit, begun, there's no internal thing that's happening. It's been over a year already. So it's just like I said before, it's just a matter of time.
Is Sleeping Giants even a thing anymore? Like, I'm looking at their Twitter stream right now, and they haven't posted anything in 3 months, and it seems like they dumped 45 tweets in one day in May, and they seem to pop up once a month with
like I said, they had a falling out between the two of them, and it's just like the woman was running it for whatever her name was. We did a story about it a while back, so.
So I remember Sleeping Giant differently than you guys do. Like, when Sleeping Giant started, it was really they were shaming publicly brands, saying, "Hey, whatever. Do you know that your ads are showing up on Breitbart and all these places?" I didn't see them, doing it the way you're doing it. It was all about a public shaming campaign to get people to stop using certain ad networks and things like that.
Right.
So that's
more what it was. Well, I want to move on. I want to talk next about executives in the pandemic. You know, we talk a lot about the pandemic's impact on the workforce and the rank and file, about how it's changing the way people want to work, it's changing attitudes, it impacted a lot of workers poorly. But what about executives? And Janelle, what has the pandemic done to permanently change the perspective of managers in business? And is it for the better or for the worse? What's your thoughts on this? I mean, my impression is that managers haven't changed all that much, and they're back to, we need you back in the office, we need you working here, and all the trying to go back to the same old. But are they dealing with their own form of PTSD at this point? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's really industry specific. I mean, we're hearing a lot about the bankers in New York and demanding that people get back to the office now, but here in Detroit, in the auto industry, there's a much more laid back approach, which is surprising because it's normally a very conservative, still a pretty buttoned up industry for the most part. And people have been very laid back about it. It's, they're sort of migrating slowly back to the office. A couple days a week is sort of the expectation of most people that I've talked to. Locally, and it seems like people that I've been talking to more nationally, they may never go back into the office on a regular basis. I know people who are actually moving to all kinds of far-flung places right now, so it's been kind of interesting to see that. Now, as far as the executives and the managers, I think people are somewhat resigned to that because that's most of the people that I'm talking with are more at an executive level, and there really hasn't been too much concern even by this group of getting back into the office on a 40-hour week. I think it's actually added for many people I know that were very, very staid in their approach previously, and had much more of a behavioral approach to management where, is someone there, are they at their desk at a given point in time, now seem to understand that people have other things going on and other things happening in their lives. That's been really a fascinating thing to see, actually, how that works, now that people are dealing with the same situations where they've got kids crawling under their desks while they're trying to have a meeting. So I think it's added some inherent empathy there.
Yeah, we always talk about, like I said, we always talk about the workforce and the impact it had, and the managers and the executives in the business, especially in advertising, have had to walk this tightrope of being a constant force of rallying the troops and getting people excited to work online and making sure that everybody's still doing well and not overworked and keeping them in line, making sure that they are working when they should be working, et cetera. I mean, we think of managers as kind of impervious to the whole pandemic thing, but what about the negative impacts? I mean, it's just like, are you hearing stories about executives who are really struggling as far as the pandemic and not being able to express it because it would demoralize the troops if they were to bring it up?
Yeah, I think there's definitely that tightrope that people have to walk between exposing their emotional vulnerabilities as well as their, personal situations that may or may not have ever been apparent to people in the past. And then still having that strength to be able to move organizations forward, to try and motivate people to achieve goals. And so it really is, I think, a tightrope that people are trying to walk. And it's, certainly taxing. I think there's a lot more that people have had to deal with, especially those people in the small and medium-sized enterprises that maybe are responsible for, much more closely for people's lives and people's livelihoods and their good execution of strategy and being able to make the organization successful. So they're sort of caught in between those two sides of the world, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm gonna jump before we get off this topic and go to the next one. I wanted to get Colin to weigh in because Colin, out of Out of all of us here, I mean, I know Janelle is a manager of sorts being a department chair for, I'm sure it's the same thing, same types of concerns that any manager would have, but you're working right in a active business as a manager. What kind of struggles have you faced in this pandemic, and how have you dealt with it? How have you coped with it besides smoking pot or something?
Just a lot of seltzers for me, man. The truth is, this has been really, really hard. My superpower is getting people in the room and selling them ideas and convincing them that's the right direction to go and getting consensus and building teams and moving forward. And that's so much harder to do. At least for me, it's so much more emotionally and mentally taxing to have to do that through a Zoom call over and over again, day after day after day. So I'm very much looking forward to being back in the office. I'm not a butts in seat guy. I'm a GSD guy. If you get your stuff done, then that's how I made that edit for you, Bob. If you're getting your work done, I don't care where you do it or how you do it or what time of day you do it. I just need it to be done when it's supposed to be done. And this pandemic has made you fall very, very strongly on one side or the other. You're either a butts and seats person, even more now, or a GSD, even more now. And to Janelle's point, I think you're going to start to see more people kind of flock to the I don't care when you get stuff done side of the fence, but there's a real benefit to being in the office, in my opinion, just because I'm an extrovert and I love being around people and I love trying to rally teams and getting people together. But in the grand scheme of things, from a cost perspective, I mean, I can only, coming from New York, I can only imagine how much money some of these companies are going to save by not having as much overhead, right? I can only imagine how less frequently we're going to have to travel for meetings and what those cost savings are going to be. There's a lot of benefit to understanding that you can work decentralized. My team, most of my team, I would say 65 to 70% of my team is never going to come in my office because they don't work in the city that we reside in.
Right.
So that's just part of the gig. For me, it's 6 of one half dozen of the other. I've been doing it since I worked back at Ogilvy. I was completely decentralized at that point. So, and that was 12 years ago. So I think technology allows you to be somewhat there, but there's nothing that's going to replace the camaraderie and the trust and those things that come with inherent physical, proximity contact.
I think we're also going to see, like, if you guys remember in the, the first dot bomb, it was like, we used to make fun of companies because they had massage therapists on their org chart. And, we may be heading back to that where as a way to get people back into the office, the perks have to be through the roof. We may even have in-house therapists like they do at Axe Capital on the TV show Billions. Like everybody was affected by the pandemic. No matter what level you were at the company, it was awful, but people and leaders need to be flexible and adaptable. And that's what makes them leaders. So, I don't think we're ever going to go back to what it looked like, 2 years ago. But I do think there's going to be a day where it's going to be, we're going to be back in offices because that's how companies run the most efficiently. It's just, it's going to look different. There's going to be way more perks and benefits for people to be there.
Janelle,
I think there's definitely something. Oh, sorry, I jumped right in there.
No, I was going to say, so you wanted to say something. I wanted to give you the opportunity.
I absolutely believe that it's important for people to have contact with other humans. There is something about that is just completely different than, as Colin said, the Zoom calls. Oh, the click, 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 and I know we've all had to do this year, where you're sitting there for 4 or 5 hours and maybe don't move because you've got to go to the next meeting and just clicking on. And it's very weary and tiresome by the end of the day of trying to manage in that way. And so I don't think that you're going to see quite as much of that going forward. And I do think people are going to want to be in the same space with each other, but it's going to take us a little while to figure out what that looks like. And that's where, I think that, this makes, all the conversation here makes a lot of sense. It's figuring out what that balance is going to be, I think, moving forward, because I'm seeing that in the educational context that, classes that we put online that are fully online, they fill up and they have wait lists. Classes that are in person are really hit or miss as to whether or not they're filling up or not. And I'm having a really hard time managing sort of my inventory of classes right now because of that. I'm trying to figure out, hey, what's really happening here and why. There's not a lot of rhyme and reason to it, but I can figure out what the pattern is just yet. But I can tell you is that there's a ton of demand for online only classes now, which, is counterintuitive to me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm seeing the same thing with my classes. I mean, my one class I'm going to be teaching in the fall is an async class. I mean, there's just no market for me to be in the classroom, but that's beside the point. We got to get on to the last topic. Just real briefly, we don't have much time, but after just 6 months of rolling out, 6 months after rolling out fleets to all users, Twitter is shutting it down. Now, if you don't know what fleets are, they are the disappearing messages that everybody sort of copied from Snapchat. Everybody put these types of things, these story type things on their platform. And Fleets is now dead. Saul, what have we learned as a result, and do we care?
So this really shows that the term "stay in your lane" actually has some merit. People. I use different platforms for singular purposes. Clubhouse went crazy, and everyone went fast to follow mode on that. I'm not even sure if Clubhouse is a thing anymore, but it doesn't seem like it is to me. It is okay for platforms to be the best at one or two things and own it. Watering down any product usually doesn't fare well long term, and this was just them playing fast follow. Let's try to steal some user base from Snapchat. But like we talked about earlier with this creative, there was no hook to actually bring people over there to change their use case. So I think this was just a misfire, a miscalculation. But, it's like we're talking about billion-dollar companies. So, this won't cost them a thing. It's just maybe a little embarrassing.
I think it's the best named one of those things. And I also can't believe that the Trump, people who are around Trump haven't used it to more effect.
Yeah, it's just like I agree with you on the Fleets being a cool name, but it's just like the platform and the experience was a little less so. Janelle, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say I think that the Trump voters are too old and not as technologically savvy to use something like that, but that's being a little bit biased, I suppose. Sorry. I think it's a great example of, yes, to some degree of stay in your lane, but also that not all product attributes will transcend all of the products in a given category, right? So that's right. There's always those points of parity and points of difference. And I don't think that having this Fleets type feature is a point of parity that everyone will have to have in the industry.
Yeah, I'm skeptical of a lot of people who implemented this type of approach to social media because some of them were really good. Obviously, Instagram ate Snapchat's lunch. They did really well with it, but other platforms not so much. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not some of them will start abandoning it down the line. Well, with that, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Mr. Saul Colt. You can find him at theideaintegration.com. That's the name of the Idea Integration Company, where he is the founder and the president and the chief consultant. So tell us what's going on in your world, Saul. What would you like to promote?
So we've been crazy busy, which is nice. It's always nice to be busy. We do have a little bandwidth opening up in August, and just like the world is opening up, man, is this the time to really kick in word of mouth and experience marketing? Both kind of took a backseat over the pandemic, but like direct mail, people are joyous to see it again. So if you're a brand and want to create a real connection with your customers, we should chat, or you could just keep sending 5 emails a week and churn and burn your email base like bad companies do. So if you want to chat, reach out, theideaintegration.com.
Saul, great stuff. Next up, Colin Glom. You can find him at charlottesweb.com. Such a cool address. I'll have to hear the story sometime, how you managed to get Charlotte's Web, the IP as your as the name of your website.
We actually had to buy it from a newspaper in Charlotte, North Carolina, believe it or not.
But anyway, tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, I would love to shamelessly plug my organization as well. We've got a lot of really cool stuff happening over the last couple of months and proceeding into Q3 and Q4. We did launch a THC-free product. So if you want your health and wellness in the form of a gummy or a capsule, we have a THC-free version for you, specially designed for people who are in jobs that are tested on a regular basis. So things like frontline workers, paramedics, cops, firefighters. If you were looking for natural plant relief, we can give it to you, and you have to worry less about testing positive on a drug test. So that's one of the things that we're really proud about. We have a bunch of new flavors and need states coming out for gummies over Q3 and Q4, and hopefully we have some big news in the next week or two coming from the U.S. government, which would be awesome.
That'd be fantastic. I'm a big fan. Let's just to say that. Yeah. Last but not least, Janelle Townsend. You can find her at oakland.edu. Yes, she is Dr. Townsend, so she is a professional educator. So tell us what's going on in your world, Janelle. What would you like to promote?
Boy, when I was having a thought about this and what I'd like to, it's not so much something to promote, but when you frame it as, hey, who you'd like to give a shout out to. And I would like to give a shout out in particular to the home healthcare workers who in the state of Michigan have had to endure a 55% pay cut for people who have been in automobile accidents or that they serve for their clients. My mom's a medical case manager, and she has several clients who are paraplegic or quadriplegic who ended up without having any home health care workers since July 1st because of the change in the Michigan no-fault insurance laws. And so these home health care workers took a 55% pay cut. And it's crazy. I cannot even believe they signed a law like this and had it go into effect. So the people who stayed on the job and have continued to take care of these poor souls that have no one to help them. Those are the people I would like to give a shout out to this week.
Yeah, that's terrible. I had no idea that happened. Obviously, I'm not paying attention to the local news, or I would know. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, an amazing fair. I mean, it starts off as a fail, but it becomes a fair. It's such a wonderful, wonderful story. IKEA in Bahrain ran an ad in English, Colin, that said, create your perfect night's sleep, but was translated into Arabic to say, same line as written, but in English. However, in typical IKEA aplomb, they turned a fail into a fair by modifying the same billboard with the overlay in Arabic that said, this is what happens when you don't get good sleep. Enjoy your perfect sleep.
It's so perfect. You wonder if they didn't do it on purpose, just to get the PR out of it. It's insane. That's an amazing turnaround and comeback. And that kind of stuff is so hard to track accurately. I only want to relate one personal story. A friend of mine was doing a spot for Mountain Dew, and it ran in an Arabic country. And because the person was drinking out of the wrong hand, it was assumed that, it was a completely degenerate product. So those kinds of things actually happen in translation, and you sometimes just do not know. But this one's hilarious in the fact that it was probably somebody literally just writing, here's what you have to translate right here, and they didn't bother to do it. It's pretty funny, the fact that they were able to turn around. It's great. I love it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Janelle.
I teach international marketing, and that's one of the first things that we teach people to do is to make sure that you do something called back translation. So you translate it into one language and then translate it back into your original language to make sure you have two different people do the translations, so that you don't have this kind of problem happen. I think that it was very intentional. IKEA is too global of a company to have a faux pas like that.
Yeah, so I'm in the intentional side too. This is very similar to, I don't know if you guys, obviously we're probably all on Instagram, but you may not follow the same people I follow. But 3 days before the Fast and the Furious movie came out, there was literally 17 gazillion memes floating around featuring Vin Diesel photoshopped into 100 different other movies from Fast and Furious, and they all were about family. That was a campaign. It looked like it was innocent and whatever, but that was completely a campaign. You don't get that many memes spun out on the same topic, that quickly unless somebody's been working on it for weeks. So these things are intentional conversation starters. But I thought it was a great way they conceived it from start to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the fail of the week I'm going to give to a Massachusetts pot dispensary, cannabis dispensary. They got sued by Sacha Baron Cohen for running a billboard campaign featuring Borat, a character that Cohen had developed for a movie. If you haven't seen it, it's out there. Even though Cohen not only didn't authorize it, Janelle, but he's adamant about never having ever used the narcotic, that he never smoked pot in his life. He would never endorse this, and he would never put his character in that position. So this is just such a no-brainer, dumb thing to do, to put a famous person in your ad when you don't have the rights to use that person. I mean, this is just stupid.
They were probably using their own product.
Good point.
It's bananas to me that somebody would think that they would get away with it. It's like, it would be one thing to use it in social, like in a story or something like that, but to put it on a billboard, which is, it takes hours to put up and weeks to take down. It's like insane to me that somebody would do that.
Yeah.
Also, if you read one of the articles I read, when they tried to file the initial lawsuit, there was no legal team on file that works with the company. And I think that speaks volumes right there.
Yeah, especially when you're in the pot business. I mean, you really should have some kind of legal advice.
Well, you have to remember, most of these shops like this, though, are smaller mom and pop operations. These aren't big companies that have legal teams or, these are a lot of startups right now. So, and people may be coming out from, the shadows, if it were, or coming from other industries that you maybe don't do advertising or think about these types of things. So, from that perspective, it's pretty dumb, but it's also perhaps explainable.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a really good explanation in the end. Well, the foul of the week I'm going to give to the fact that Spike Lee's new ad for cryptocurrency, and I should say that it's an ad that he started, not one that he necessarily directed, but Spike Lee is in a new ad for cryptocurrency. It's come under fire for ignoring the fact that cryptocurrency doesn't democratize money like the ad seems to be trying to claim, but it really kind of enables rich guys to get richer. It's not doing what's promised in the ad. And Saul, I know you brought this to my attention first. I'd love you to weigh in on it, and I'm sure everybody has something to add to this, but go for it.
So I'm friends with Spike Lee, and by friends, I mean we both stood waiting for our cars for 5 minutes at a valet at an LA hotel, and he said hey, and I said hey. So speaking as a friend, I will say this made me scratch my head. Visually, this is textbook Spike Lee. He did direct the commercial. I do not know if he wrote it. I couldn't find that information out there, and it's a joy to watch. It's if you like Spike Lee like I do, this is a Spike Lee commercial. The place that it falls down heavy for me is the message of hope around encouraging the African American community and people of color community, because everyone in the commercial is of color or minority. He's really encouraging these people to invest in, maybe the most confusing currency that fluctuates based on nothing that anyone can follow or explain. Seems very irresponsible. One of the key takeaways or stats in the commercial is that he says 7 million Americans do not have bank accounts. Well, I would have rather the commercial be about, let's get 7 million Americans a bank account instead of trying to get them to take that first step into investing, their first investment being in an incredibly volatile currency that no one can explain to make me understand it.
Yeah, I hear you on a surface level. I think that this is the first communication, at least this is the conversation that I had. Just let me take a step back. I have a friend who has direct access to this campaign. He's the chief creative officer at Campbell Ewald, or co-chief creative officer at Campbell Ewald. And so he and his team oversaw the production of this ad. And this is one piece of a much larger story about a company that really does want to change the narrative around banking, especially for people of color. The gentleman that I spoke to is as a Black person. A lot of the people that are around this project are African American or people of color, and the desire is to change the narrative around banking for people of color and their ability to access the same kinds of systems that are right now almost exclusively dominated by white, old, rich men. So I think that while there is considerable...
The founder of this company is a white, old, rich guy.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But that's
and
I think that the desire to change that narrative by a rich old white guy is something that we need to at least continue to hold him to the standard of. If he's going to throw this salvo over the wall, I want to see action behind it. I want to see that they take steps to actually make sure that this is a system of equality and democratization. But if it's just a quote unquote a person of color washing, like trying to get as much as I can out of this moment because this is what we're supposed to do, quote unquote, then it's going to fall immediately flat, and they deserve all of the negative feedback that they've gotten. But if this is what I've been told it was designed to do, then I support it 100%, and I want to see it succeed.
But you have to agree that they failed in execution, because you're not going to get a second, third, and fourth. Like, this isn't a serialized thing. You've got to grab people like an introduction to a bold statement needs to be like a creativity needs to be like a slap in the face and shock people. And this was more confusing than anything else. So if this is a part of a tease campaign, you got to follow up with that reveal almost the same day.
Yeah. Well, I would say that I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but Spike Lee is having a hell of a week. Did you hear what he did yesterday at Cannes?
Yeah, he announced the wrong. Well, he didn't announce the wrong winner at Cannes. He announced it in the wrong order.
Yeah. Well, he basically during a talk back in the morning, he announced who won that night. So
I just think it's funny that Colin has a friend and Saul has a friend, both in the same story. So this is fantastic. So really great that you...
1 degree of separation through Bob Norp.
Yeah. Well, I'm not your friend. Well, I have a suggestion for this list. I'm going to leave that hanging out there. I have a suggestion for this list, or just want to discuss it. Comment online. Use the hashtag #FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment, have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week for our last show before our August break, so get ready for that, and hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly.